Good morning. هو كده. No, it's fine. I'm just going to say the intro remarks. Can you please have your seat so we can start it? Thank you. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. My name is Samer Atallah. I'm the Associate Dean for Graduate Studies and Research at the UNSI Sawira School of Business. I'm also the overall coordinator of the AUC Business Forum. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. I apologize for the late start, but I'm sure we'll give you the full time that this conversation deserves. I'm here on behalf of Dean Sharif Kamel. He'd be running slightly late, so he asked me to open the roundtable on his behalf, on behalf of the school. I want to start by thanking the two co-chairs of this roundtable, Dr. Noah Farhadi and Hala Barakat, for working on putting this roundtable together and discussing it for the past 6 months, and for selecting very distinguished participants and speakers from international universities coming to Egypt to talk about this very important topic, from private sector, from international financial institutions, and from a lot of our faculty in the UNSI Sawira School of Business. This is a very, very important topic that is personally very dear to my heart, because I'm an economist and I believe in monitoring and collecting data in order to gauge firm performance. And this is an increasing area of importance to us as a school, and globally is to measure the firm's performance vis-a-vis their social responsibility, vis-a-vis the environment, vis-a-vis their social responsibility and the governance. So today's topic, my colleagues will be presenting a lot of what we've done in the school in this area. We very much looking forward to hear from you. What is it that we can do better? What is it that we can improve? How we can make use of all the data that we've been collecting in these areas to better serve the industry, to better serve the overall cause of sustainability. I want to end with thank you again for your time. I want to especially thank both our speakers for coming to talk to us today. And I'm going to pass the baton to Noah, the chair of the session. Thank you, Noah.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Thank you so much. Good morning, everyone, ladies and gentlemen. This is, as Dr. Samer was highlighting, an opportunity to exchange important questions regarding sustainability. We are focusing on two topics. One topic is sustainability reporting, and the other topic is regarding gender diversity. You might ask yourself, why these two topics together? And we will see. These two topics have many overlaps, and we are facing many challenges that are common in both topics. At AUC, we have done extensive research for gender diversity, and at the same time, last year, we performed a survey with over 100 companies in Egypt. We asked them about sustainability and what they face as challenge and how do they see the opportunities. Now, we get you with us, Monsieur Moabi, and we go through accounting discussions on accounting and ESG parameters or ESG criteria. You speak about the data, and hopefully we see the challenges that you are facing. And after you, Ms. Lado is going to speak about gender diversity and overall sustainability. I look forward to having a very fruitful discussion today, and please Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Sorry, just a point of order. So if all the speakers and the participants, just before they start, can introduce themselves, and so that I think you've already got the list of participants, but it would be useful to, for all the speakers and the participants to introduce themselves. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And good morning to everyone. Very pleased and very happy to be here. And thank you for the invitation from the American University in Cairo. So maybe I will start with a very quick introduction of IFC, what we do and why sustainability and sustainability reporting in particular is extremely important to us as an institution. IFC is the sector, a private sector, we call it arm or branch of the World Bank Group. So we focus on supporting, funding, financing, and investing in the private sector. We are obviously a development institution, and when we say development institution, obviously the sustainability perspective is extremely important to development. Our focus on sustainability has been around for, I think it's part of our DNA. I think it's really embedded in the way the institution works, operates, and provides its support to the different clients, businesses that we work with. So obviously when we work with, we intervene in any given market, we not only intervene with private sector players, I mean businesses, but we also support other type of what we call market partners. Actually, the Federation of Egyptian Banks is one of them. We're working and engaging with other market players as well. And we try to promote the sustainability agenda in each and every market in which we operate. That's a quick sort of presentation of what we do. Sustainability reporting has been for us a theme of interest. I would say over the last almost 10 years now, we've developed a toolkit that we call Beyond the Balance Sheet. The objective of this toolkit is really to raise awareness about the importance and the business case of sustainability reporting in general. It doesn't focus on any given standard. It really tries to build the case for improved and increased sustainability reporting and help companies embed processes. Maybe between brackets, I need to mention that reporting is not a performance approach. It's really a sort of process and output approach. It helps organizations produce an output. So that's what reporting is all about. Performance is a different discussion. So the objective of this toolkit is really to help organizations build processes within, so as they are able to produce that output around sustainability. So the indicators, metrics, topics have to be decided upon by each and every organization, depending on the industry or the sector in which they operate. And that toolkit has been actually around for in very different markets where we build the case, raise awareness with the different partners that we work with. And it actually aligns. It's very interesting to see the work that we've been doing with this toolkit and the emergence of new sustainability reporting standards, IASB, SASB, GRI, integrated reporting. So there is a convergence between what we've been doing and all those standards, which are actually becoming, some of them, mainstream today. I'm not going to go into the details of each of the reporting standards that we have out there, but just to maybe create or indicate two categories of standards. So there are standards that are like GRI is the most prominent one, which are focused, which are what I call generic reporting standards, because they speak to a wide spectrum of stakeholders. So that's one category. I think GRI is the key or the main reporting platform. Integrated reporting is the second one. And then you have standards that are more focused either in terms of the industry they focus on. As SASB, for instance, they have industry-specific reporting platforms, or reporting standards that are focusing on a specific population. IASB, for instance, IFRS S1 and S2, the main target of those reporting standards are obviously investors and not a wider range of stakeholders. So I think that's basically what we have in the market out there, and the sort of different platforms that we use. More specifically in Africa, you have markets that started promoting reporting, sustainability reporting, and took the lead compared to other markets. South Africa is one of them. In the western part of Africa, Nigeria and Ghana are interesting markets to consider. In the eastern part, Kenya, for instance, is another one, Rwanda as well. In the northern part of Africa, Egypt and Morocco are two interesting examples as well. And these markets have started with, if I, for instance, take the case of Morocco, they started with voluntary-based reporting platforms, guidelines, and they, helped companies start, build capacity, internal processes, have internal resources that they can build their expertise in this area. And then they switched from a voluntary-based approach to a sort of compulsory approach. A few years ago, they started. They produced a new directive for listed companies and companies raising funds on capital markets. So now it's compulsory, for instance, in a country like Morocco, to produce what we call ESG reporting. So that's quickly what we have across the continent. Now, in terms of challenges, I think obviously the first challenge is the fact that it's, even though, it's interesting to have this roundtable, and we have a lot of roundtables about reporting, sustainability reporting on a monthly basis, but it's actually a very new topic. We try to forget that this is something that has been on for less than 10 years, and you don't necessarily build expertise in such a short time span. So you need time to build expertise, to build processes, and more basically to find the right resources. You don't have a lot of universities who produce people with a sustainability diploma or background. So it will take a bit of time, maybe, I don't know, 5, 10 years, 5 or 10 more years, so as we can have more resources. The supply of expertise will be higher in the market. So I think resources is a key challenge. The second challenge is, I think, for me, these two are the highest in terms of priority and importance, is regulation. And linked to the first challenge with expertise is the capabilities within the regulators themselves. So if you want to have a new regulation, for instance, the enforcing reporting, sustainability reporting in a given market, you need to make sure that the regulators have the capabilities, internal capabilities, to be able to address those reports and to read them, assess the quality of those reports, and be able to address any bottlenecks or gaps that they see in the market. So I think, and so obviously capacity within regulators, but also regulations. I think we sometimes believe that whenever there is a new topic, very trendy, and people will embrace it and companies will start to produce sustainability reporting. It's not the case. As for any other thing, if you don't have something that is compulsory and so an obligation for companies to follow, most likely they will not do. A few, what we call early adopters, will do it, but most of the companies will be in a wait-and-see mode, and they will start producing anything once there is a regulation in place. So regulation is another main issue, because most of the markets in which we operate, at least when I look at the African continent, most of the markets in which we operate, there is no regulation about reporting or sustainability reporting or ESG reporting. So I think these are the three main issues that we've seen over the last years. Now, obviously, I know that there is another issue or topic that we most likely will be addressing this morning, which is the geopolitical changes that we see, we increasingly see, and especially starting from the last few months. I think that's a main challenge. But it's a challenge that might be temporary. actually we don't know. Nobody knows what will happen in 4 years down the road, but it's actually very important to follow and see how things will evolve, because if it becomes embedded within the regulators, regulations, and the different markets. I mean, if you've seen that even the European Union has decided to most likely postpone some of the CSRD requirements that they have. So even the European Union, which is to us, I mean, to me, is the key driver and champion worldwide in terms of green and agenda with the European Green Deal. So even if the European Union starts postponing its requirements, then there is a big question mark on where we're going with all the sustainability agenda worldwide. So I think the geopolitical forces that are playing against sustainability in general and sustainability report and ESG investments is a key challenge. Now the big question is whether it will last for more than 4 years, or it's going to be a very long-term challenge. Yeah, thank you.
So thank you so much. I appreciate it. I would say you continue then we gather your point of view, and then we bring them all together. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Good morning. It's an honor to be here in Cairo at AUC, the OMC Sawiris School of Business. I'd like to thank Dr. Samad and Professor Noah and the team for the privilege. And thank you, Maz, for your introductory comments. And I would like to share your optimism about the challenges being temporary. By way of background, I'm an operations and business transformation expert with over 3 decades of experience in the private sector. Currently, I'm a strategic advisor to family groups and CEOs, helping to guide them to align wealth with purpose, both on an advisory and investment arm. I also serve as the vice chair of the 30% Club MENA chapter. Essentially, the 30% Club is a business-led campaign which is aimed at increasing the number of women on the boards of publicly listed companies, and in executive leadership. Globally, more than 1,000 board chairs and CEOs across over 20 countries have signed as members. It's an absolute privilege to have collaborated with AUC and the Women's Observatory on a number of very impactful initiatives, namely the launch of the Bloomberg Gender Equality Index, the board list, and workshops on unconscious bias training for male CEOs across industry. Progress truly requires partnerships and collaboration. And before I deep dive and add to the challenges that were mentioned earlier by my fellow panelist, Muaz, I'd like to highlight some of the shifting foundations that we are witnessing in 2025 that will impact leadership. Firstly, let's acknowledge that family business or businesses dominate the global economy, driving over 70% of global GDP and generating $60 trillion annually. In the Middle East, that figure exceeds 90%, with many family groups navigating first and second generation transitions. So we'll park that thought for a minute. Now, this shift, coupled with geopolitical uncertainty, is reshaping corporate influence, ESG, and the economic landscape. At the same time, we are witnessing the largest transition of wealth in history, with women now controlling 32% of global wealth and are projected to inherit up to $30 trillion over the next 5 years. Now, this isn't just an economic shift. In fact, it is a transformative force for inclusion, sustainability, long-term resilience, and value creation, where purpose, impact, and legacy are shaping a new generation of leadership. So to fully realize this opportunity, I'm going to focus on addressing 3 key points. Firstly, the current ESG backlash. Secondly, the systemic challenges that pose as barriers. And thirdly, share with you some champion proven initiatives that actually do accelerate progress. We are living in an increasingly VUCA world, a world that's defined by volatility, uncertainty, complexity, ambiguity. Narratives have shifted overnight, potentially undoing decades of progress in addressing systemic injustices, from education and hiring practices to governance and policy making, and to the rhetoric around meritocracy. A rhetoric that suggests that diversity and inclusion come at the expense of merit. In reality, they are complementary forces that drive stronger governance, innovation, and economic growth. And the ESG landscape is facing increasing resistance. In the US, investment firms have been warned that investing in ESG funds or divesting from certain sectors will potentially result in penalties. Global corporations that once championed DE&I are now reversing or scaling back commitments due to regulatory pressures. And some of these examples were actually formerly leaders and champions. I'm going to cite one of the companies being Accenture. In 2017, they set out some very impressive and very ambitious targets to achieve by 2025, namely 50% of their entire workforce will be women, 30% will be managing directors, and the CEO was a globally recognized leader in D&I and holding executives accountable for meeting clear goals. And this culture, in fact, had a ripple effect. It was emulated by the Middle East leadership, and often they were quoted as saying, progress on DE&I is just not fast enough, and questioning why aren't companies and more diverse and inclusive when the business case in favor of a culture of equality continues to strengthen each year. Last week, a memo was sent to almost 800,000 staff announcing that they would no longer be using D&I targets to measure staff performance, nor would they be submitting data to external diversity benchmarking surveys. Similarly, Goldman Sachs also followed suit. Previously, they had pledged not to advise companies with an all-male, all-white boards for IPOs, always insisting on at least one woman on the boards. And recently, they dropped this diversity rule, claiming that it was no longer needed. And we saw in Norway 30% of Tesla owners selling their cars, protesting Elon Musk's perceived misalignment with their values. So 2025 will be a pivotal moment for responsible leadership, where leaders who prioritize people and long-term value creation will in fact hold a competitive advantage. Responsible leaders will be the ones that move beyond the narrative to tangible action. They will embed ESG into their core business strategy and operations, not as a PR exercise, but as a driver of sustainable growth, walking the talk, delivering real impact beyond pinkwashing, greenwashing, and box ticking. They will prioritize measurable results, and they will engage policymakers and investors to shape regulations rather than reacting to them. While the US moves towards ESG deregulation, Europe and Asia are strengthening their sustainability mandates. The Middle East is uniquely positioned. GCC national agendas are actively driving ESG adoption, with governments leading the charge. I personally believe that the region has an opportunity to do things differently. So what are the systemic challenges? We'll deep dive into those in the GCC in particular, where I am based. I've been based in Dubai for over 20 years. So firstly, there's a data gap and measurement challenges. Secondly, there's a demand issue. Thirdly, access to networks and opaque selection processes. And fourthly, we have a broken system where there is a lack of collaboration. And finally, I'd like to also address cultural expectations and AI bias. Let's start with the data gap. So good behavioral design starts with data. What doesn't get measured can't be fixed. And we know, and Muaz has earlier explained to us, some of the frameworks that exist currently. There's lots of indices, there's disclosure requirements, and there's a plethora of all of these, but essentially there is no one size fits all. Until recently, in the GCC, we did not have one single authoritative source of market data. In April last year, Heriot-Watt University in Aurora 50 developed and published a new dataset that was committed to publishing this annually for at least 3 consecutive years, providing a source of data to elevate the profile of women currently serving as board directors and to celebrate the future progress of female representation of PLC boards in the GCC. So what did the data look like? In the UAE, 11.2%. With Dubai leading at 12%, Abu Dhabi at 10.7%, Oman, Bahrain and Kuwait sitting at around 5%, and Saudi Arabia 2%, with Qatar at 1.8%. Audit committees show slightly better representation. In fact, 13.3% of audit committees in the UAE are chaired by women, and this report was commissioned by Grant Thornton in November last year. As of December 2024, ESCA, the Security and Commodities Authority, data showed that the number of women on boards of listed UAE companies has grown 200% since 2021, and its progress testament to the UAE's unwavering commitment to promoting gender balance. However, there's a lot more work that needs to be done. Takes me to my second challenge, regulation and enforcement, which is a critical driver of demand. Globally, the use of mandates, targets, and disclosures have driven progress. In the UK and Australia, women now hold over a third of board seats. Since March 2021, the UAE government mandated for publicly listed boards at least 1 woman on board. And in September last year, this mandate was extended to the private sector, which actually took effect last month. However, regulation without enforcement is ineffective. Who is monitoring compliance? What are the penalties for non-compliance? So the supply of qualified women is not the issue. And in fact, the AUC Women's Observatory alone has in excess of 2,500 board-certified women on their database, and similar talent pools exist across the region. However, unless there is demand, these women will continue to sit on the databases instead of sitting on boards. Another big challenge is the access to board opportunities. A research commissioned by Deloitte in mid-last year reflected these entrenched systemic barriers. Globally, less than 23.3% of board seats were held by women, and only 6% of global CEOs were women. So it's not just a regional issue. So why are these systemic barriers existing? Firstly, board seats are often filled through close circles and personal connections. They are not selected on merit. Secondly, women are often excluded from the informal networks. In fact, I've been told women need a passport to play, whether it's in the majlis that we host in the Middle East, or whether it's drinks in the evening, or whether it's a discussion over a game of golf. And thirdly, board roles are very rarely advertised. In fact, in discussion with several executive search firms, they highlight that executive search firms are the last resort, and they are only used when informal networks fail, and clearly unconscious bias plays a major role. And of course, there's the lack of collaboration and fragmented efforts. Many entities are operating in silos. Enhanced collaboration among governments, regulators, private sectors, and advocacy groups is essential to create a cohesive strategy for meaningful change. And finally, I'd like to address the cultural expectation and social norms. In this region, it is not about women leaning in. We have a concept in Lebanon we call wejbet. It's a duty and it's an obligation. And in our cultures, this can discourage women from prioritizing leadership roles over family responsibilities. So in the last few minutes remaining, I'd like to explore some of the initiatives that have actually worked to address some of these systemic challenges. I believe the region has an opportunity to lead differently as government policies, national agendas, and ambitions are all aligned to make talent development and D&I a competitive advantage and not just a social responsibility. The SDG 5 pledge to accelerate gender balance in the UAE private sector was launched in 2022 with the objective to increase women's representation in senior middle management roles to 30% by 2025. And the pledge was built upon 4 main pillars, including equal pay for all employees, regardless of gender, and it was a voluntary reporting by nature. This was an excellent example of successful collaboration between the UAE government, private sector companies, and the 30% Club MENA. So by the end of 2024, 65 companies across sectors had signed the SDG pledge. I personally hosted a number of the roundtables and workshops, really demystifying the ask and not being judgmental and telling global leaders, just start. It doesn't matter where you are at on the journey. And secondly, we launched the 30% Club MENA Toolkit, which is a comprehensive toolkit created with McKinsey to provide actionable strategies for organizations to implement. A remarkable resource provided free of charge to all 30% Club members. I've personally supported next generation women in family groups who have stepped up onto family group boards and operating companies to implement change. These leaders took ownership and set the tone at the top, and the toolkit helped them to identify gaps and areas for improvement. And of course, there's mentorship programs, and sponsorship and advocacy are also key. So in the last few minutes remaining, my closing remarks. So governance, diversity, and sustainability are not optional. They are the foundation of business resilience and economic progress. The private sector must lead, regulators must ensure accountability, and this in fact demands bold action. I believe it's time to evolve the ESG language. This is an opportunity beyond compliance, a shift from disclosure to real measurable impact. Less talk, more action, more collaboration, and breaking these systemic barriers to progress. We need responsible leadership, aligning strategy to build sustainable, inclusive, and profitable businesses. And just before I finish, I have one call to action. On any panel that I sit on, I always like to have a call to action to all the leaders in the room. And my question to you is, what is one thing that you as leaders can do today to be a responsible leader and put people at the core of your organization? Because leadership isn't just about what we say or what we report, it's actually about what we do. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. I'm sorry. It was very interesting. Thank you so much. I really appreciate both of you for addressing a very complex topic. At AUC, we conducted a survey of 100 companies in Egypt. We approached them and asked them about how do you see sustainability in the country? What are you doing with sustainability? And 1/3 of companies that we approached told us that they are doing reporting because of regulations. The other thing that we saw is a strong need for culture. So sustainability is not only about reporting or diversity, it's more about the culture. Sustainable culture within the organization. Do companies really genuinely follow sustainability because of its content? 1/3 of them were saying that sustainability is very complex. We have a very complex set of frameworks and regulations. The speed is too fast. A couple of other issues are emerging, like a shortage of skill and awareness of the requirements for meeting the complying with the regulations. And at the same time, when we look at diversity, gender diversity, we see that diverse organizations are not doing that because it is mandatory, because when women are engaged in management, evidently, we see that there is a scientific evidence those companies outperform their peers. So there are many benefits and many challenges that we have identified in our research. Now, my question to all of you is, and why all these complexities with reporting and regulations? Why do we have these complex frameworks? Six or seven major frameworks are existing. Why do we have this complexity in regulations, Mr. Saif?
Yeah, actually, it's not a complexity, but just to ensure accountability, transparency, and the consistency in reporting, because the concept...
Could you please introduce yourself? Thank you so much.
For that. My name is Dr. Tariq Saif. I'm the Executive Director of Financial Services Institute and the Egyptian Institute of Directors and the Regional Center for Sustainable Finance in FRA. Actually, as you said, Doctor, that the concept of sustainability is still not absorbed by many organizations. It's about creating a culture. So the main role of regulator is to ensure the transparency, consistency, and accountability in the reporting framework. So since the concept is a bit new for the Egyptian economy, we need a sort of a strict regulatory framework to be able to promote the concept. So the FRA actually issued many decrees. I will start with the gender diversity and gender equality. FRA doesn't see gender diversity as a social justice only, but it is economic necessity actually in Egypt. So now there is a decree required from all listed companies and all regulated, not listed, all regulated companies by FRA to have 20% of the board of directors from women. Also for all federation, there are 6 federations regulated by FRA. The same requirement for the federation. It was 1 member, but it is already amended to have 2 members with minimum 25% with minimum 2 members. So also we have the decree number 205. This is offering financial incentives for companies actively promoting gender, like exemption from fees in FRA or considerable reduction in fees. This is, I think, very important decree and help FRA to measure the impact of the regulation on the different companies. We have many projects with AUC. We have the application and we conduct many studies in this respect. For ESG, actually, we issued 2 important decrees by FRA. The first one is 107, and this is for all listed companies. They are required to report on ESGs and TCFD as well. The other one is 208 for all regulated but not listed companies with a capital exceeding 100 million Egyptian pound. We are working hardly actually to amend the post decrees to reflect the IFRS S1 and S2, and this will be issued very soon. Also, we have the decree number 100 for 2020. This is for the corporate governance, including a frame for transparency in reporting. And also we are working on another now on the guideline for insurance companies, governance code for insurance companies, and also ESG and gender diversity are embedded in the guideline. So this is the main effort taken by the FRA to promote the two concepts of ESG, or to promote sustainability in large. Thank you.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much. So if you allow me to summarize, what you say is that FRA is trying to reduce the complexity by focusing on the key topics and trends in sustainability reporting and even with the regulations on diversity in Egypt. Agreed with you. However, what is really interesting to hear is that when we look at the numbers, and I had this discussion with you, Hala, when we look at the numbers are based on the regulations that are existing, not only in this country, but in many other countries. We see that companies have already started complying with the regulations. But beyond these regulations, when it comes to the culture and the genuine implementation of sustainability, the question is, do really companies do a great job in inclusion? Are they doing really a great job in reporting when it comes to reporting? We see some issues with inconsistency. Actually, when I'm listening to you and to both of you, I see that there are challenges with inconsistency, and challenges with overlaps, with the issues that we are seeing in both topics, actually. Inconsistency and the challenges that are existing with lack of transparency to some extent. So any ideas? What is the current state in your organizations? Do you face the same issue, or please go ahead?
Hello. So thank you for having me today. This is my second time in the roundtable discussion about ESG. I thought maybe I'll introduce myself. I'm Randa Hamid. I'm Managing Director of AUC's Portfolio Management, sister company of AUC's Stockbrokers, which has been in the market, in the capital market for 35 years. So we've been quite a long time in the Egyptian market. I'm also board member of EGX, and I'm vice president of the Egyptian Society of Technical Analysts. So we go very much into education and trying to promote financial literacy, and recently trying to promote ESG. I thought I'll elaborate after our colleague here, since we're in the same field, the capital market. I would just like to add that, of course, the FRA has taken very serious, very important steps this past year, especially after COP27, when we started launching the carbon credit market. And I believe this has been very important because it's a way to monetize emissions. Maybe I'll take you here further to the environment, because that's of great concern now, because it's not a luxury now to take care of the environment. So together, the FRA and EGX, we have launched August 2024, the first voluntary African carbon credit emission trading market. And we've had so far around 5-6 transactions, but it's progressing. There are a lot of brokerage companies that have obtained the license to actually trade those emissions, the carbon emissions. The reason I find this important, first, because of monetizing, it's a way to incentivize firms to actually reduce their emissions, because they can either issue certificates, or because also the firms that will have to abide by the CBAM regulations to be able to export. So that's another important thing, because starting from 2026, companies that export, and especially fertilizers and heavy polluting industries, will have to abide by the EU regulations of a certain cap on emissions. So this carbon credit market, I think, will become quite important then. So that's the second thing why I think monetizing the carbon emissions is good. The CBAM, and the third is that the carbon credit certificates have been denoted by in the capital market law as a financial product. So that brought me over to see how this can incentivize the carbon credit market, how it can incentivize the stock market, because of course that's my field of interest. And I've read a few papers about the spillover effect from the carbon market to the stock market. And apparently in China and the EU, where this is quite prevalent, the carbon market, it has had some good results. So maybe we can, in the area of the FRA and the stock market, look at it from this aspect. The second area that I was looking into and I was interested in was the index. We have a sustainability index since 2010, and it's the S&P EGX ESG index. And I had a chance to actually meet with the sustainability team at EGX. And they're very nice. It's a lovely team who are trying very hard, and they're trying to understand more about sustainability. And we looked at the components. We looked at the companies in the index. And they showed me the methodology of S&P. And I thought this is, we're trying to see the regulations and how we can abide with them. But I found the methodology, which I really have with me, it's very detailed, very comprehensive. If we can use these guidelines, because they apply to different companies and sectors. And again, as was said, and which I believe in, you can't improve what you can't measure. So if we have guidelines, it's the first step, so that we know how to improve ourselves and improve our reporting and standards. So that was another third area that I was interested in, is looking at, about the sustainability index. And something else in my field, I was interested at looking into how analysts, financial analysts, when they come to look at companies and they find that those compliant with ESG regulations, especially those on the index, usually they issue favorable outlook for the companies. And these companies have proven to be quite solid during crisis. And we have a few papers released about how companies that comply with ESG regulations actually manage to stay resilient during crisis. Second thing that I would like to add, because if we're looking at qualifications for people in ESG departments in companies, I had the pleasure of attending the CFA Challenge last Saturday, and congratulations for the AUC team that won. And I was looking into the CFA because it has such credible certificates, and I found that they do have an ESG certificate. It's a 100-hour course, self-learning, or maybe there are courses for it. But that would be a good start, because if we want to train, we're saying that we don't have the caliber, we don't have the capacity, so that can be introduced in universities and have the qualification needed for the team who are going to be in companies to ensure that they are compliant with ESG regulations. Something else that I've heard in the last meeting there was a couple of years ago and today is how to ensure that it's in the DNA of the company. This has really resonated with me, because how can you have something in the DNA of the company that needs education? It's something like financial literacy. How can you have it in people to be financially literate? And it comes with education. So we'll just have to spread the education. And that's something I'm passionate about, is financial literacy. So maybe we can have more efforts into ESG literacy. Again, I'm sure a lot of the organizations can do that. That is, that's basically my interest and my thoughts about regulations and how to have the capacity for it.
Well, thank you so much. So when I get back to your point with making it more easy, you spoke about education. At the same time, you spoke about data complexity. Dr. Abdelkader, we had a chance to speak about the data and the importance of data, and why education needs to do a lot more in order to make the next generation ready for the progression that you spoke about, the progressive society that understands sustainability quite well and is prepared to deal with a highly complex regulation, highly complex data. And we see that academia, we have Professor Khaled here with us, distinguished and Professor Nermeen, and we have a very strong academic base here at the AUC. How do you see this, this topic of culture, inclusion, reporting, and next generation and education together with the culture and what you called personally, you call it progressive agenda for sustainability, please.
Thank you, Dr. Noah. Thank you, Hala, Dr. Samer, for arranging this, getting this group together to discuss. And thank you so much, Lodi and Moaz, for the insights. I've been writing down some insightful remarks. And I think the starting point, I will start from where Randa ended. It's education. if we want to have the change to take place. So the first thing from my experience over the years, my current assignment with CIB, it's very important that we reframe sustainability. So I think, Lodi, you mentioned beyond compliance. Regulations are very important, and Tariq mentioned the FRA efforts, the Central Bank of Egypt effort, but this is very good, but this is not what's required to proceed with sustainability or to embed sustainability. So let us reframe sustainability beyond compliance. Doesn't mean that compliance is not important, extremely important, but this is not the right way to approach it. And most importantly, beyond politics. You mentioned the geopolitical and the political backlash against sustainability taking place in the United States, now pressuring European Union, who are taking the lead. So let's reframe it away from compliance and from politics, and let us focus on the business case of sustainability. Sustainability is about growth, and this is how CIB approached sustainability. That's why CIB issued Egypt's first corporate green bond at the peak of the corona pandemic. It was very successful. So we innovated, we believed in the ESG as a way to sustain our profit. And a shortcut argument to prove that sustainability is about growth, that the new IFRS and the new ISSB regulations call for companies to report on value, not profit. So value includes profit, environmental, and social impact. And that's a fact. That's my shortcut argument. I mean, we can proceed. So if we approach sustainability, it's a way to grow and sustain our profitability, the whole thing will change. So in this case, governance disclosures, as Moaz said, will be output-driven. So we disclose not to satisfy regulators, of course, but to measure our performance and to strategize our decisions. So disclosures, and this is what we do at CIB. We started to innovate in disclosures, and we even revised the narrative, or the acronym of the ESG to become ESG-DD, Environmental, Social Governance, Data, and Digitization. And we issued 2 reports because we believe that ESG without data and digitization is quite hollow. So compliance is driven, output-driven, to measure our performance and to help us. The other point, diversity. Actually, I wouldn't see that women should be included in board because of regulations 30%. This is demeaning for women. Women are on board because they are effective. It has nothing to do with being male or female. Actually, boards that have women, they outperform by 16% both the time. It's about this inclusion and bringing different skills, expertise, emotional intelligence, they complement. I mean, our board has different nationalities, and it's not mandated. We have from India, Pakistan, from UK, and it's perfect. They are women. So women, it's not because 30%, 20%, because a woman adds value. It could be 90%, it could be nothing. So let us liberate. And I think education, and you mentioned that responsible leadership. If a leader sees the business case of sustainability and has this narrative and within the culture of the organization, there is no showstopper. I don't need regulations. I mean, CIB joined the PRB, the net zero banking, and it's not mandated because I tell them this is good for our balance sheet. So compliance, governance are there to drive performance, not to report on to regulators. And let me be very clear, it's not that I don't see the value of regulations, on the contrary. I mean, the Central Bank of Egypt, the FRA, they made it perfectly well. Unless corporates and banks see the business case, it will be a checklist item. And starting, as you said, we need to take the first step. Our region is at crossroads from climate change, geopolitical challenges, you name it. And the starting point is changing minds and education. And this is where the role of the AUC and these gatherings, I mean, we have huge potential to fix gaps in our region and take the lead to So that's my take on governance and diversity.
Thank you so much. Dr. Abdelkader is leading, Chief Sustainability Officer of CIB.
I'm sorry, I'm
Yes.
the Chief Sustainability Officer at CIB. I'm also honored to chair the Sustainable Finance Committee at the Federation of Egyptian Banks. Muaz, Alia, Ike, the IFC has done a wonderful job with us. And this is something that change comes and emanates from industry actors.
Yeah.
You know, a federation could drive a change within the banking sector. One bank could drive a snowball effect within it. So an industry actor, one company can make a difference, a huge difference.
Well, so far, I really appreciate the point that you are raising is extremely important. I get back to you, Dr. Nermeen and Dr. Saif. One thing that I'm listening, one thing that I'm observing that all of you are, you didn't mention it, but actually the word that is the magical word here is the value generation. Value generation through diversity, value generation through ESG, value generation through regulations, whatever the culture. So my question is, Dr. Nermeen, maybe you start with your point and then we go back to Dr. Saif.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Nermeen Shahada. I'm an associate professor of accounting. Associate professor of accounting here at AUC Sawira School of Business. So following up on the point that Ms. Dalia referred to actually regarding CIB's board, so I think that we always refer to gender diversity as the main diversity variable when we talk about board diversity, maybe for the social justice issue, as Dr. Tariq said, for its potential impact on the economy. But by large, like diversity variables are much more than that, like referring to professional experiences, educational background, even nationality and age. So in one of my papers, I checked the relationship, I tried to track that between the national diversity for having foreigners sitting on Egyptian companies' boards, listed ones, and the relationship was found to be positive. So again, like I guess other diversity variables should be taken into consideration.
Got it. Okay, thank you so much. Yes, please. Yeah, sure. One thing in addition, Dr. Tariq, if you allow me, because Dr. Tariq is, we are facing some challenges with Dr. Tariq. Dr. Tariq, I have one particular, Dr. Khalid, I'm sorry, Dr. Tariq. I have one major question for you. You are one of the leading accounting scientists in this country, and you are facing many challenges in converging all these complex standards for reporting. Is there any way to simplify this reporting? And what do you think about what Dr. Abdelkader was saying regarding value generation through reporting and at the same time diversity? Please.
Thank you, and I'm very sorry I have to teach at 11:30, so I have to run. But my name is Khaled Dahawi. I am a professor of accounting at AUC, and I also sit on 4 boards in Egypt, including 2 international boards, and I had 3 audit committees. So I'm going to try and make this more practical if I can. Dr. Abdelkader is spot on. Unless the leadership of the organizations understand the value generation proposition, they're not going to go there. It's going to be an artificial implementation. I remember a very interesting paper, I can't remember the year, but it came out by McKinsey at some point, and they generated a study that said X amount of markup on stock price of well-governed companies. This was the paper that I think created the change in the Middle East on corporate governance, because leaders started understanding stock price is going to go up when your company is well governed. And therefore, people started implementing it because they believed in the value of the implementation, not because they felt that the regulators involved them or required them to fulfill that. For example, on the women's side, I see a lot of companies on the stock exchange running around to bring women just because they need to bring a quota of women, and this is not the reason for that. The reason is, what can a woman bring that a man cannot bring? And there's a lot of papers that have really shown that there is a difference in decision making. We're working now on a paper showing if there is a difference between corporate governance, gender diversity, and performance of a company on companies of stock market. The second part that I think is a shame, and were mentioned here, is the education part. I see that people are confused between sustainability, CSR, ESG, corporate governance, so many acronyms, very little knowledge of what is the difference. Our managing directors, our leaders of companies don't understand the difference. Many of them end up thinking some of it is zakah, some of it is good doing to the market, and so on and so forth, and we haven't educated the market. I've worked for many years, and my colleague Osama, on training programs with IFC that have stopped, unfortunately. This was a very successful program. We used to introduce different corporate governance knowledge to countries in the Middle East. I think it's been 2-3 years now that they've stopped that program at the time that I think needs this type of involvement, because we lack resources, it has been said. And unless we bring resources, we are not going to be able to implement. Unless we understand the value creation proposition, we are not going to be implementing. Unless we understand the cost, and nobody here talked about the cost. Who should implement and who shouldn't? This is a very expensive exercise. I don't want to put Dr. Ablader on the spot, but she maybe can mention the cost of what you do. You do a lot, but it's very expensive. And not every company in Egypt or the Middle East can do that. So who should implement what? As Dr. Mentioned, there are a lot of complications, to come to your question. And unless you understand all of what I said before, nobody's going to really implement, but it's going to be a selective implementation to make the FRA or the other regulators happy. So instead of that, I think we should start introducing this and educate people. We should simplify. For example, IFRS has what's called International Financial Reporting Standard. One of them is for small and medium enterprises. Not all companies should implement all standards. It's very expensive to do all standards. So there's always a distinction between who should implement what.
Yes.
And I think we need to be very careful in how we do it. We need to measure and understand, but we need to build two very important parts. First, knowledge of why is this important. I don't think many of our leaders understand this. They think it's regulatory imposed, so we have to do it. Second, we need to have very strong education, and not academic education, but practical, professional education, like the IFC program that was running, where you are able to directly set and ordered in the form that the board members can understand. For example, I used to present a module that was, what does board members understand about financial literacy? And I used to sit on boards where people would read, come to the financial station, flip the whole thing and keep reading. It's very common exercise. So unless we tell them what's there and what value added does this group of papers add to the annual report, it's going to be useless. It's going to be simply in the market again and again, we're ticking numbers, as has been said. This has been done. So I think we need to come down to the point of making, and the core part, in this side of the world. We need to understand the cultural barriers, that we are not in the US, we're not in England. These are not acceptable acronyms, are not acceptable requirements. We need to make people understand. And again, a good study like McKinsey's of the value of, and maybe at AUC we can start something like this
Yes.
with your effort. What is the value generation of corporate governance?
Thank you so much, Dr. Khalid.
And what is the cost also? And what is the cost?
Yeah.
And what's the cost, of course?
You made a very important point, and again, I get back to you, if you allow me, I get back to our ESG barometer. When we asked the managers, they were aware of everything with climate change and everything, but when it came to reporting, that dropped significantly. Only 20% of managers in Egypt, they are aware of the details.
I'll tell you about what you just mentioned, and you reminded me. I think I'm an expert in this area, I think. But I have to study every year several hours to keep updating myself,
Yes.
to understand the changes that have happened.
Yes.
It is amazing the amount of complexity, the amount of information that you need to keep, and the fact that there is very little. I'm very happy to be at AUC. If I was not at AUC, I wouldn't have been able to update myself this way.
Got it, got it.
But the rest of the market is way, way behind.
Thank you so much. I think Dr. Tariq, you and then Muaz, and you and Dr. Abdelkader then. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Please, go ahead, Dr. Tariq.
Yeah, actually, I have a comment on your opinion, Mrs. Dua. I agree and disagree with you. Definitely, the culture is very crucial. It is the name of the game in sustainability. However, in the Egyptian case, I would like to echo Professor Khalid. We are not in UK, we are not in USA. We have lack of awareness, so the role of regulator is extremely important. Why? Because we noticed that the regulations triggered many organizations to start building capacity, to recruiting sustainable officer, to start developing or reporting exceeding the requirement of the regulation. Also in the FRA, we have 2 training arm and 1 researching arm, so we supported the market in education, in awareness even for free, in financial literacy, and also we are working with some international bodies to have a co-branded professional certificates on sustainability as well. The other thing I would like to highlight, and I'm definitely unhappy to say that because I'm coming from insurance industry, but the non-banking financial services are lagging far behind the banking. So if you had good experience in banking, definitely we cannot cascade it down to other non-banking financial experience. For we still have a clear framework of regulation to support the concept of sustainability, till creating the needed culture in the non-banking financial sector. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Mr. Moavi, please.
Yeah, thank you, Noah. Just a few comments on the different interventions from my friends and colleagues around the table, but maybe start with the fact that the programs have stopped. Actually, we never stopped any of our programs, so if either we used to deliver them directly ourselves, or we have partners that deliver those programs. So in the case of Egypt, most likely we're referring to the board certification program, and actually it's delivered by the IOD, so it's still ongoing. It has never been stopped. So that's the first comment. The second comment is on Dr. Dalia mentioned the regulation, compliance, and it's true that I'm not even sure there has been any study on the number of companies that follow regulations or move whenever there is a regulation, so as they are compliant, and those that the early adopters. I mentioned the word early adopters early on. I think it's true that the value proposition is important, and often, in some instances, when you are able to convince the leaders of the organization, they will decide to move on and do something about sustainability, or by the way, any other topic, actually diversity and any other topic in general. But I think that there is also something else that is extremely important, but it's very difficult to measure, which is culture. It's the DNA of the organization. Oftentimes, some organizations, and I can even mention some of the clients we're working with, there is something about the founders or the leaders of their own organization. They believe in diversity. You don't even have to convince them. They believe in sustainability. You don't have to convince them about sustainability. And they will do whatever it takes to even go beyond whatever exists in the market. So I think the culture that is embedded in an organization, that most likely comes from the founders, thinking, history, backgrounds, education, their own experiences is extremely important. And that culture remains within the organization for decades. That's extremely important. So that was the second comment. The third comment is diversity. In all of the markets where we had these quota regimes, a lot of companies, and I even have a case, a couple of weeks ago, sitting with one of my clients, with the board members, and they needed, because there has been a reform in the market, they needed another woman to lead to be part of the audit committee, and they were looking, oh, my sister is here, she will join, it's okay, no. And we said, that's not the purpose. That's not the purpose. It's not about ticking the box. And I think that's why if we only think about it from the diversity perspective, we are missing the point. Because if you really want to improve the diversity and follow the, the quota regime, you have to take it from all the angles. Because diversity, again, is not a social justice issue, it's a performance issue. So diversity at the board, for instance, is a performance challenge. So you have to improve the numbers, but you also have to improve governance at the same time. How you improve governance to ensure there's not just diversity, is not just ticking the box. You do board evaluation. You also disclose, the prevalence, attendance ratios of the different board members, the composition of the different committees at your board, the background. There are a lot of things that you need to do to be able to reach that performance. It's not just about the numbers. So that was my third comment. And the last one is about, we talk about why it's complicated, ESG, sustainability, CSR, because there is no unique definition. It's a very complex topic because you don't have one definition of when you say ESG, what do you mean by ESG? ESG is E, S, and G, and under each one of them, you have a lot of indicators, a lot of subtopics or sub-themes. So, if you don't have one unique universal definition, it's extremely complicated.
Thank you so much. I think you wanted to add something, and then Dr. Abdelkader, I apologize.
Yes, thank you so much. I really wanted to follow up on what Professor Khalid mentioned. My name is Ayman Ismail. I teach entrepreneurship at AUC, and I also run AUC Venture Lab. And I sit on several boards, but they're very different companies than the ones that we discuss. All of them are in the growth phase. So I sit on the board of a bank that is a startup bank. I sat on the board of microfinance and consumer finance companies that were also startups all the way till exit. I sit on the boards of 2 fintech companies that are processing a huge amount of cash, but they're also startups. And I also sit on other boards of early stage startups. Yes. And you are talking about corporate governance, and I want to shift the conversation to beyond corporate. So governance beyond corporate. And I think there's a lot to talk about. There is an assumption that companies are born old, listed, and mature. This is not the reality. Companies are born small, they grow, they evolve, they mature, and then eventually they might get listed or otherwise. So what happens in that startup stage? And I think this is very important. How do you build the corporate governance throughout the startup? What happens is the majority of the economy, whether the new economy, digital, or the old economy, family-owned businesses and SMEs, is not part of this conversation. And it's not part of the conversation because the value of this conversation is not clear for them. And in often cases, it's actually not there. A lot of the companies that are listed now in major stock markets, people are questioning the value and the cumbersome and cost of being listed and taking companies private. We're seeing that in Egypt, companies delisting, and that's extremely important, including even in global markets. One of the Orascoms just delisted. So there is a movement to think about there's more value for being private because the cumbersome level of regulations around governance doesn't justify the value. So let me step back to companies that are startups or family-owned businesses and try to ask 2 questions. Why and how is corporate governance or is governance relevant for them? So for startups, governance makes the company investable. If I'm going to attract investors, whether venture capital or other types of investors, they need to see some level of governance. It's different from what you see in a large corporate, but they need to see some level of controls to ensure that their money is invested properly. Second, makes the company scalable. If you want to take a company from, and I've seen companies moving from 50 people to 1,000 in less than a year, companies growing 30, 40% month over month, not year over year, and they need to scale. There is a level of changing to governance that goes there. Third, you need to have the company exitable. If you're going to exit that company as a family business, a partial exit, or as an SME, or as a startup exiting at some stage, There is value of that in preparing for that. And companies that are planning for exit, they take 2 to 3 years to prepare for having the proper governance structure. Fifth thing is attracting talent. There's a difference to attract talent, someone who's worked in a large corporate with a high quality person, to attract them to a company that's managed informally with the family at the kitchen table, versus there's a certain level of professionalism. And last is professionalizing the company, which is part of scaling and attracting talent. You need to manage it in a different way, and governance is a key part. So when we talk about the how, traditionally in governance, people talk about agency problems, talk about protecting shareholder values, but that is not the rationale for startups and family-owned businesses, because very often the shareholders are actually the managers, whether the family members or the entrepreneurs. But you still need to have a different type of governance that is so important for the growth, scalability, investability, exit potential of that company. We don't talk about that. And this is super important to make governance relevant to people who are the biggest part of the economy, rather than a handful of large listed companies. So that's about the why. Second part is the how. The tools are typically very different from a growing company to a large company. Large company, you're focusing on boards, disclosures. Family-owned businesses, we're talking about private business. There's an element of privacy, so disclosure is not the issue, but there's an issue of managing family dynamics, generational transition, the relationship between the family patriarch and the next generation of owners. For the startups, there are issues of moving beyond the founders. The founders are there, but you want to create the next level of managers. For the SMEs, professionalizing the business. So the how varies a lot. So a big part of it is staged. So not, as Professor Khaled talked, it's not one size fits all. There's a menu of governance interventions, and you need to add those lists of interventions one at a time as the company grows and the level of professionalism, keeping in mind the cost and the value. So that's one part. Second thing, the tools vary. For startups, there's shareholder agreements, there are reserved matters, that's completely different from corporates. For family businesses, there might be a family council, which is governing the relationships between the family members outside and governing how those family members, especially second and third generation. Al-Arabi is an example of a company that does very well. Nahdat Masr with Dali Abd another example of a family that does very well. Those cases are not talked about in that context. Third, sector specific. In some companies, like in the financial services, you start with a heavy regulation. In others, in sectors like trade and commerce, regulations are very light, so the governance requirements are different. Fifth is trust-based governance. Element of trust varies a lot in family businesses, where there is a history of employment and history of relationship. So there's a lot of literature on trust-based governance, informal regulations, informal relationships, as opposed to the very formal IFRS coded, stock market driven, regulation driven regulations. So there's a very different world of governance that is often ignored. I took the actually certification that was by IFC, and it is 100% focused on regulations, mandated, corporate, large scale. And a lot of people were sitting there who wanted to learn how to govern their companies, their family businesses, and they did not learn much. And what they learned sometimes was misleading. Last comment, one of my students who was the CEO of a family-owned business, second generation, and he said, my father passed away, I inherited the business. I went to the experts and I did everything by the book. I created the board, I got the accounting firms, I got all of those people. I wanted to reduce my engagement in the business and increase the scalability of the business. 2 years later, I was working twice as much and making half as much profit. And I had to dismantle a lot of the processes that I put because they did not make sense for my type and size of business. So let's put governance in context. And when we talk about it, there's governance for large corporate listed companies. There is governance for the most of the economy, which is more important, and we need to talk about it and implement it and teach it and train for it.
Thank you so much. Dr. Abdelkader, please. Good morning, Dean Kamel.
Morning. Just a quick response to Dr. Dahawi's mention of costs. Again, if we see sustainability as business case, cost gets addressed. And Lodi mentioned something about broken systems. If you have an ecosystem-based model, cost could be redressed, could be covered. For example, at the Federation of Egyptian Banks, we're having intensive training for all banks, just leveraging development finance like the IFC, MDBs, others who get on board and provide. So if you have the whole stakeholders together, cost is completely addressed, and this is out of experience. The other thing, Dr. Tariq, you mentioned, regulations are very important. But I have some reservation that you mentioned UK, USA culture are relatively far ahead. Actually, the financial crisis was caused by these cultures. The climate crisis is caused by this crisis. So let's change our narrative and self-perception. Actually, the sustainability and the ESG logic is very much inherent in our culture, historical culture, and I mean, we can discuss this. So the potential is very much there. And it's the bottom-up approach. That's my last recommendation. Top-down, very important, engaging CEOs. But once you engage young managers, fresh graduates entering into the corporate world, I mean, the impact is exponential. It's huge because they're very much receptive to the concept.
Thank you. Actually, Ms. Lado, I have one request. We have 4 participants. They didn't say anything. We listened to them, and then I'm very keen to see your point of view. Thank you so much, if you allow me to say that. Please, one of you, we are looking forward to hearing your voice. Yes.
My name is Ali Afifi. I work on the sell side, director and on the sell side at Arqam Capital, one of the region's largest investment banks. To be honest, in my experience, not that long, but when I started, I think ESG, diversity was seen sort of as a luxury or something that's been spoken about. And I think the word narrative that has been mentioned, I think it's key. And I think changing the narrative, as everyone here was saying, educating people about the value creation in the business. Now, again, I've worked on several IPOs, and initially, this part was always like, let's put a part for investors to engage, let's put a part on sustainability, on ESG for investors to engage. But once they actually moved on, and once, with the years, they saw that actually this was of a high value, that investors engaged, or even in certain instances, divested from certain investment because of lack of diversity, because of lack of governance, because of lack of sustainability. So I think the key is educating people or changing the narrative on the actual importance, changing the narrative, and then obviously from a top-bottom approach, you can actually educate people within a certain entity. And then again, on the diversity, I still remember when we first started, it was mentioned that 30% of the wealth is held by women. So that brings the question, having diversity on a board, for example, is that really a luxury, or is that even something that should be discussed? It's a necessity in that sense, because again, it brings us back to value creation. So I think that's the key point here.
After that, please go ahead. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you very much for having us here. My name is Ahmed Bilal. I'm a professor of economics and sustainability. I'm the CEO of Decarbon Global for environmental sustainability and consultancy. I'm coming from the other end of the story. I'm one of the consultancies that helps companies to report and do reporting and do some consultancies and advice in collaboration with the IFC and the BRD and all the international organizations. Let me give you the other side of the story and where the pain comes from for the companies. One thing is, one of the most important things, that knowing that they need to report as a compliance to regulations is a pain for itself. So one of the things that we try to do with companies is to give them the idea of it is not about reporting, it is a process. So reporting is very good and very important and everything, but sustainability is a process. It has to be embedded into the DNA of any organization. This is one of the things that we need to embed into our cycle of implementation. The other pain is data. Data gaps are very important, and we have a huge challenge in data. One of the most important things that we need to align with is to have a universal database for each organization. The FRA, when they announced the decrees 108 and 107 and 108, and they started forcing or making, not forcing, companies to report in accordance to their regulations in compliance with the GRI standards and the TCFD for those who are 500 million above their capital. They did not announce the outcome of those reportings. They made them report first on quarterly basis, and now they are reporting on annual basis. We would like to see outcome of the reporting frameworks. This will give others an idea what we are missing, where we are. Benchmarking is very important. Internal benchmarking for companies and reporting is very important to see how they are progressing. In the past 2 years, when the regulations became compliance for specifically in the banks, and we here are in the presence of greatness, the CIB and Dr. Dalia, of course, is driving this move in the financial sector. When they compare the banks, when they compare themselves, the first thing they compare with is the CIB. Why? Because he was a leader. He initiated the move back in 2015, before and way before this was a regulatory and a compliance request. When they started putting their strategy, and this is the mandate of the governance body and the BOD, the board of directors, when we have a board of directors who understand the value of sustainability and the core of the business case that can be generated from implementing the sustainable agenda and implementing the process of having this into one of our actions and activities, day-to-day activities, we have a very good and solid foundation. Sustainability is a synonym for continuity. If we have this concept as we are growing and we need to continue growing, continuity is a key word. Having a business case is very important to support our implementation. And this is one of the key things that I would like to recommend for the AUC. One of the greatest pains, what we should do. This is the big question. Okay, now we know this is a short gap, or this is a shortfall in our organization. How can we implement this? One of the key questions that we are facing with banks right now, especially with those who have signed for the PRB, the Principles of Responsible Banking, when they did their portfolio impact analysis, and we identified the impact areas, and we identified the sector that causes these impact areas. We are now ready to engage with our clients, how we are going to convince them to transition and transform from the business as usual to a greener and sustainable activities. How can we support them? How can we convince them? We need subject matter experts to teach the sectors to how to implement and transition easily and flexibly. We don't have a magic wand that we will kick and we will transform. We have to explain to organizations and companies that baby steps are okay and acceptable. Let's do it. Once we start the first step, this is the hardest one. The other side of the story will give us the snowball effect that Dr. Wilsock was talking about. The snowball effect will come from the moving wheel. Once we have one organization initiated the market and the second will follow, leaders will have to be up front and center, because they need for others to follow them. And this is how our culture is embedding. And regarding the diversity and inclusion is very important, but we don't have, and I totally agree that women are very important and everything, but we don't have to set it on the board. If we don't have the base coming from top bottom, how we are going to select and promote and have a successor of a leader and efficient board member who can lead the team below. So having a diversity and a culture of equity and just for hiring efficient and reliable talents is very important in our culture here. One last comment I would like to add. Sustainability is all about altering our mindset. Once we have the concept of continuity and long-term approach, we need to change our approach from a short-term vision of profitability to a long-term vision of continuity and growth. This is one of the things that we always advise our companies with.
Thank you.
And thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So I just, if you allow me, just put it in one, you said a very important thing, and I get back to you. It is that sustainability is more about the process. It must be an integrated process in the organization. Now, I get back to you with one question. Beyond all these regulations, process, culture, I was listening to you, and I had this feeling you are speaking about the sense of urgency. Do you see a common sense of urgency in this roundtable discussion?
Predominantly, I do. It's a great question, but I think.
Can you turn it on, please?
Turn on, yes.
And the way to really address the question, and I think, Moaz, you mentioned earlier about quotas, and you mentioned as well about, you know, we don't need just to have women on boards, and absolutely not. So let me clarify. Having the data is important, but it's about having a target. We do not believe in quotas, and quotas we don't believe work because you end up with tokens. And so the only countries that I'm aware of that have actually used and mandated quotas have been, I believe, Italy and the Netherlands. And as a result of quotas, they're sitting at 40% women on boards. However, we don't believe in quotas because we believe that women are not only board certified, lots of them do the board certification programs, which incidentally, men that sit on boards are not asked to complete these certifications. But also, there are so many organizations that believe in the business case for diversity that they are building through coaching, through professional development, through so many different programs to actually elevate the women within their own organizations and create a pipeline from leadership to the board. So I have to disagree with you in terms of women are owning their journey, and there are many leaders that believe in the business case for diversity. And on the point of quotas, the reason why we don't believe in them is because you end up with tokenism. And the reason why targets are set, because it goes back to the point that most of us agree on, that you need to measure and fix a challenge, you need to have a baseline figure and some data to begin with. And the reason behind a 30% target is because multiple research has shown and has proven that one voice of one woman on a board is not enough. And 30% seems to be the acceptable level at which that voice can make a difference and can actually implement strategic change on the board. So just to qualify and clarify, it's not quotas, it's targets, and it's not a supply issue because the supply is there. It is a demand issue, and we're not waiting on the regulators. We are also waiting on responsible leaders to see the business case. And if I may just sum up with a really quick point about family governance and corporate governance, thank you for raising that. Family governance is one issue, and rightly so. And we have so many challenges within families, whether it's succession planning, whether it's whether it's relationships amongst family members. And what we're seeing is more and more families adopting and implementing family charters. But let's not forget that they also run operating companies. And so operating companies requires corporate governance. So you're absolutely right in there. They're two separate types of governance. But what we are seeing is the next generation of men and women stepping up to take leadership roles within their company, their family operating companies. And don't forget that many of these young generation are highly educated, come with a different mindset, quite an institutional mindset that perhaps the patriarch or the matriarch of the business may not have had. So let's not underestimate the new generation that are coming in. And I like your point on trust because yes, they do not believe that the right people are sitting around them. And they may not be the top consultancies, they actually might be the retired corporate executives that have gray hair and have experience, decades of experience, that can sit alongside them and help them to implement.
Thank you, Sam. Please, go ahead.
Hello, this is Ghada Kandil. I'm the Chief Director for Bank of New York. I come from, I'm privileged actually to come from the banking sector, because in banking we do not have men and women, we have bankers. So it gets me always to be thinking, you know, like I too do not believe in quotas, even though I am a woman. I believe in efficiency, in action, in targets, as you quite rightfully said it. But then again, in other cultures, not necessarily in different countries, but even within the same country, in different industries, they do not have the privilege of the same mindset. Mm-hmm. So I have actually listened carefully once to somebody who had a different perspective than mine, because I always said, I'm not a quota, I'm not just a number. But they told me in some industries, no, you need to have some sort of a push to have that kind of representation. So we also need to keep an open mind when we're discussing different industries, because people are not the same. And the privileges that are offered by default in each, or by exposure in different industries, is different. And for instance, you know, like when I have friends who are actually working in the petroleum industry, and the leading ladies, now they're considered, you know, like, wow. It's like, why is that a wow? You know, but apparently in their field, they do consider them having women on boards or being CEOs of an industry as such, as something new. So I think we need to keep an open mind, and we need to address again the embedded part of education, where we need to have this as, you know, like preliminary everywhere. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I just want to raise an important question. Just a moment. I just really want to get back to summarize what I've been hearing here. And beyond regulations, we speak about sense of urgency. Are we happy with the current state of sustainability practices in Egypt? Is there anything we can improve? And if not, what are the opportunity costs of missing the opportunities of improving sustainability practices? This is the next topic that we have, and it goes in line with what you are raising, with simplifying the processes, with you that you said sustainability is actually a process, reporting is a question of culture, and at the same time the sense of urgency that I was witnessing in your speech. And Dr. Abdelkader, you raised the generation and the importance of the bottom-up approach. So when we combine all these topics, are we really happy with what we're observing at the marketplace? You have a very important role in your ecosystem. You are in interaction with many clients. What you are observing, the same thing with education, Dr. Narmeen. You are looking at many young generation people are coming out of the school working in this area. What is your opinion on this topic? Are we happy with the current state? What can we do better? And thank you. In 10 minutes, we are closing the session. I think.
I'll take less than 2 minutes. So I think a very important and timely topic that we haven't referred to is regarding technology and AI. So when we refer to enhancing financial reporting, transparency, and disclosures, I think that integrating technology and AI-driven analytics and blockchain, they might be enhancing significantly data integrity and accessibility. So this was...
Maybe let me step in. Actually, IFC invests in private sectors, and most of our investments are with private companies and align with what you mentioned on the different corporate governance setups based on the type and the context of the company. And what we see is that we're quite lagging behind, especially on the privately held businesses, as compared to more regulated entities. When you look at the banking sector, it's a different story. When you look at the listed companies, it's a different story. Even in those setups, there has been a lot of progress over the recent years, especially in Egypt, but more has to be done clearly to be a bit more sort of champions or lead-in market on the ESG/sustainability perspective.
Thank you so much. Please, go ahead.
Thank you. I don't know if it's a privilege or a burden to be the last speaker. Thank you for inviting me. It's always good to be back at the AUC. Never imagined so many friends and colleagues around the table. I'm gonna try and play my favorite role, which is devil's advocate, and get to other points we have not discussed and we're slightly missing. First of all, I differ with you on the 30% because every man knows that women control all wealth on earth, so they don't control only 30%. Diversity, fully agree with Dr. Nurmeen. We're focusing too much to the level that we're doing positive discrimination, which is harmful to the women movement or seeing the value in women. As Dalia and Ran mentioned, and Rada also, in Egypt, we're used to having women on boards and as head of states. It is our culture. The problem is the West hijacked the values we have, put them as corporate social responsibility, governance, and transparency. And what happened during the Russia-Ukraine invasion is a total failure on governance and transparency. We kicked countries out of what we claimed in international monetary system, SWIFT, transfer. We manifested private sector money because we claimed to be associated with Russia. So those values made a huge confusion in the market. Then Gaza, we defied not human rights, we defied humanity. So all those values suddenly, in the eyes of the people we are trying to sell to, I'm CEO of Empower Investments. We are a World Bank IFC supplier for corporate governance in the region, Lebanon, Egypt, Iraq, Jordan, and other countries. So we're facing so many problems because all those values suddenly seem, are you trying to export to us? And then another issue, sustainability in eyes of many was seen as environmental. And we believe in targets. And the most important target was carbon emissions. And we should stop manufacturing automotive cars and move to electric. And then when the Chinese expelled and became better, the Europeans and the Americans put tariffs on electric cars and removed the targets. So what are we trying to sell? We are literally shooting ourselves in the foot, which is dramatic, not for us, for the young people, for the base, because if it doesn't move from bottom to top, it doesn't succeed. It is like, and here I'm asking the help of the IFC, because we've worked together on regulation a lot, related party transaction. In Egypt, we have the most obscure rule, which makes it just a tick of the box now, because you have to get a General Assembly approval before doing the transaction. So everybody is faking reports, and we're helping them as consultants. Everything is moving to checkboxes and templates, and the use of AI is fantastic, can help us, but it also can help you do the reports of whatever you want to do without really doing the value creation you have. Another aspect we haven't raised is the public sector, which dominates most of the economy in Egypt, because you was asking about if we are happy with sustainability. How does the public sector work? Sustainability became important during COP27, and that was it. Banks were forced to sponsor and pay money for things they didn't want to do or didn't see the value yet in. And most of the public sector managers, they see this is just for decoration. This is what the minister likes to hear, and so on. I have some experience of sitting on public sector boards. So it's just like, you come from the private sector, please help us do this and that and that. They're not the CIBs. They're not the number one share listed, tracked, listed on the GDR. So, and transparency of giving government tenders and offers. At the end, governments, as Ayman said, is there so we make more money, sustainable, livable forever. If we don't make money, if we don't have an opportunity to be in the business, if there's no clarity, let's go back to basis slightly.
Thank you so much. I think, are there any other topics that you would like to share with us? Because we have only, I think, I apologize, Dr. Tariq, we have 10 minutes left, and we need Hala to summarize our roundtable. Thank you so much. Yes, please. Yes, please.
Just
Very
one
short.
second. Dr. Ayman, I totally agree. We have focused on the governance of the larger corporates. Now in EIOD, we are working on a new guideline or new governance code for start and scaling up companies, another one for family business, and eventually we will issue another one for financial institution with salient features like Islamic finance. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Hala, please.
Okay, thank you all for joining us today. This is the hardest part to summarize a lot of the very interesting talk that you have been bringing into the table today. So I'll start with the title that was given is that the most important point is what is the cost and the value generation for not only corporate startups, SMEs, and family business that comes out of governance in general. It's very important. We also talked about how expensive it is. It's an expensive exercise for companies, whichever level they are. Governance is about the process embedded in the DNA of the companies, and it requires time, a lot of resources in order to build that expertise. We also need responsible leadership within organization to take the idea of governance, sustainability, reporting, board diversity, not only from the leaderships, but to build it from the bottom up in the organizations. Regulations are very, very important. It's not only about enforcement or penalizing companies, but it's like incentivizing and bringing the value and what's in it for corporates to embed sustainability reporting. We also discussed it's not a quota, it's not the quota regime, it's more about targets. Private sector role is very, very important. They need to understand that sustainability is not only reporting on sustainability, it's reporting on the value of what sustainability brings in their corporations. Partnerships and collaborations with different stakeholders, policy, governments, private and public institutions. And we need to focus on what's beyond the narrative, what's beyond reporting. It's not only about reporting or ticking the boxes in the reporting, it's what the value that brings from applying sustainability measures and diversity to the companies. We need a lot of access to networks on the regional and international level. Very two important part is data. Data is extremely important to bring data and relying on like AI and technologies because as we said, what can't be measured can't be fixed. We need to work more on data. Also, we spoke about the education, professional awareness, not only academic education, but the awareness that we bring in the table leadership positions from companies and corporates to really understand the meaning and as Muaz said, the universal definition of ESG with its different variables. I think that's it. We need to have like advocacy groups all over the country in order to push forward the agenda of sustainability and reporting in general. I think that's much summarize the points. If you have anything else to add, Dr.
Thank you so much. And if you allow me, I have one additional comment that was the sense of urgency. There is a sense of urgency. It's not, sustainability is not an optional topic. It's a must. and we need to find a better way to implement it. Thank you so much, everyone, and ladies and gentlemen, I really appreciate it, Dr. Tariq, thank you, and everyone, Dr. Abdelkader and Dean Kamil. Anything you want to add? And thank you so much. Appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Noah. Just a couple of points. I'm told that there is a group photo, so I'll ask you kindly to go to outside this way for a group photo. The second thing is, as we do every single year with our business forum, all these discussions and conversations and recommendations are summarized and published in a white paper. You can go to the Onsi Sawira School of Business webpage. There is a link to the business forum where you can find the previous year white papers of the previous roundtables with different topics that have been discussed. It should take us about a month or two to maybe a month to finalize these white papers and revise them with the roundtable chairs and the speakers. So they should be in a month's time published in the website of our school. And the last point of order, there is after the group photo, there is lunch outside. Did I cover all the? Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, I think it was great. I think the issues that needed to be raised were raised. And I really loved the issue that was raised about resources from the data scientist professor, because I truly believe that you don't need a lot of resources. I have seen companies work on spreadsheets. Just do it. Just start. Because if you're doing it